if you're ever feeling out of alignment, where it feels like you're beating your head against a wall or just nothing's working or everything's frustrating or whatever's going on, then try and reconnect to your why, the bigger vision around why you're doing what you're doing, and to give yourself that motivation back, to build that momentum.
There's so much power when you can ask other people for help and have faith and allow them to actually show up and serve.
It takes a while because people are hesitant a little bit, skeptical, also just cautious with our money. And I get that. That makes sense. But I think the buyer's journey is just taking longer. So as service providers and business owners, we also need to recognize that.
Happy birthday to you.
Welcome back to No Half Cakes Podcast. My name is Jim Sabelico, and I'm honored that you are here with me today. It means a lot to me. It truly does, because this show is more than just a podcast for me. It is literally a way of life. If you are new to this, the No Half Cakes thing in general, and you're thinking, what does No Half Cakes even mean? Allow me, if you would, a minute of your time just to explain. I started my first business at the age of 8. Was making decent money for an 8-year-old kid with no bills. It was the closest thing I've ever had to freedom in my life at that young age. And I felt great. That continued me down a path of trying to be quote unquote successful, where I just continued to chase money and houses and cars and all the traditional vanity metrics up until 2019. My son's 6th birthday, I came home. And I wanted to wish happy birthday to him, and I wanted to sing happy birthday in front of the cake and the whole nine. And my wife pulls out the birthday cake, and half of it is already gone. And in that moment, I'm standing there realizing, this is not what success looks like. Yes, I've built businesses. I've made as much money as you could possibly want. I've had all the toys and stuff, and it sucked. I'm standing there realizing that I missed out on an experience I'll never get again. I had no relationship with my kids. My wife was days away from divorcing me. I was in the worst shape of my life. It was at rock bottom for me. So I stood there in front of that cake and said, hey, this is it. No half cakes in your life, meaning I'm not doing this again. Not just I don't want to miss another birthday, but I don't want to accept less than the whole thing everywhere. I'm talking professionally, my relationships, emotionally, spiritually, financially. I want the whole thing in every area. And our guest today is someone who resonates extremely well with that entire story. I don't want to spoil too much of her story. I'm going to let her tell it. But I just think it's important to continue to have these conversations where we talk about what real success looks like. We can kick ass in business, but we also have to kick ass in the rest of our lives, right? I don't want you to be this amazing entrepreneur, this business owner, but not have a relationship to come home to, or not like what you see in the mirror, or have no self-confidence. I want you to have all of those things, which is why I keep bringing guests on the show, like our guest today, who I'm just not going to wait anymore, because Miss Kelly Sinclair, I'm honored to have you here. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Jim. And this is going to be such an important conversation. It's one that I have with myself a lot, as well as with podcast guests on my show, Entrepreneur School, because it seems like such a conflict that we're always going through, right? When we're ambitious and we're chasing big dreams and we want to create amazing things for whatever reasons. In a lot of the cases, it's for our families. And then we go along that journey, and like you experienced as well, we start to see that there's so much more to it. And we need to catch ourselves from making some of those sacrifices that we maybe unintentionally make along the way.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that too, because when you said it's a sacrifice you're making for your family, I originally had the mindset man, I'm doing this amazing thing. I'm getting up at 3:00 in the morning. I'm coming home at 8:00 at night. I'm providing for my family, right? I'm doing this big sacrifice. I'm doing it for them. So why are they not celebrating me? Why are they not super happy that, hey, you're the best dad ever. You're sacrificed all this stuff. Meanwhile, what I was really doing was just providing dollars in the bank that a credit card could have done, right? I wasn't doing it. I wasn't showing up in my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my kids. So I love that you said that, because it's not really aligned with actually providing the value that the family really needs. Would you kind of agree to that?
Absolutely. And I think the thing is, like, as business owners, we take on a lot, right? Like entrepreneurs, we are every single hat inside of our business. We're sales, we're operations, we're customer support, we're marketing, we're all of the things. And that is like 8 full-time jobs sometimes, right? And and so I think that there's a wonderful new narrative, new conversation coming up. And I thank you for being one of the people who's championing this. And that's around how do you build a business that fits into your life and not the other way around.
Yes.
Instead of being like, okay, and this is what we're trained to do. Like we are breaking so many generational patterns, so, as they say, right? Around what we used to see is that like you grew up, you became an adult, you got a job, and then you like earned money to pay your bills, and everything else was if there's room for it, right? Like everything was the end of the means instead of building things the other way around, which I already know that like in the generation that I'm in, and I've got kids the same age, so we can't be too far off age wise. It's like I see my dad even going like, why are you like, doing your life this way? Why are you, prioritizing taking your families on vacations? We went on 3 vacations this year, and he just like, it still blows his mind that that's what we're doing at age mid-30s instead of just, socking away everything for this falsified vision of like what the end of your career and retirement looks like. Like, I just don't believe that that's the way that we should do things anymore. And so I really want to support like business owners in particular in helping to build something around what your values are and around the way that you want to spend your time and what you want your days to look like. And that's both a beautiful thing in that we have all that flexibility when we're entrepreneurs, and also like incredibly overwhelming because we have to make all those decisions now.
It is. And there's a lot I want to talk about to kind of unpack that. But one thing that came to mind immediately when you said that was the urgency of all this. Because like traditionally, the way that I grew up, and I'm sure the same for you, like the expectation was you go work your 9 to 5 until you're 55 years old or whenever, somewhere around there, then you retire and then you start your life with whatever you have left.
Right.
And I know for me, one of the things that hit home was my father-in-law passing. And this sounds trivial in the scheme of things, but one of his wishes, he always wanted to go to Alaska and just experience what it was like to go to Alaska and see the sights and just visit it and be there. And he planned to go once he retired. He never made it, right? So he passed away before he got that opportunity because he continued to work. He was able to and wanted to provide for his family. One of the hardest working men I've ever met in my life. But he pushed that off and said, when I retire, then we'll go and we'll start doing that stuff. And we went and took that trip right after that. I was like, hey guys, guess what? We're going to Alaska. Like, I'm not waiting. And I think it's so important that we understand the urgency of all this because it's really easy for me personally to get stuck in the grind of 9 to 5. You've got a massive to-do list. You've got all these things going on. You have to, like you said before, right? You've got to be the entrepreneur. You've got to be, you're in the relationship. You've got to provide for your kids. You've got to take care of yourself somewhere in there, like all this stuff. And you feel like, all right, well, I'll just keep pounding through the list and tomorrow I'll get another chance. I'll just keep doing it. But we don't always get that other chance tomorrow, right?
No, and it takes a lot of reflecting and really integrating this belief and awareness that life is short, right? Like it's a cliche for a reason because it's true. And we all have our own experiences into our own understanding of that. And for me, it was growing up with a mom who was sick all the time. My mom had various ailments from the time I was 9 years old for the whole rest of her life. She had over 40 surgeries by the time she passed away, and that was from a back injury and then a massive car accident and years of rehabilitation, but almost having to have her leg amputated like several times. And then she got cancer. And after that, that was a couple more years of pushing through and just seeing how we all dealt with that, right? We all dealt with that. Like, we know, I got married in the midst of all of that. And she told me to have a destination wedding and that almost had to get canceled because she almost couldn't come. But these are the things, it's like you have to do the things now because you just don't know when stuff is going to end. And I think for me, all of that was very normalized. It was normal to be in a crisis. And thanks to a lot of therapy, I realized that that's what it all was. It was just a very traumatic experience. But when she ultimately did pass away, I had my kids were under 4, both of them, 2 kids under 4. I'm working in my corporate job at a big PR firm, like getting up at kids out of bed at 6 a.m., like out of the house at 6 a.m., actually, which is just way too early, not just for me, but for children for sure. Getting on the road, my husband's driving, we're commuting into the city. I'm drinking a coffee, but I bring like an extra coffee to fill it back up so I could just basically like I could have had an IV of caffeine and it wouldn't have been sufficient enough for me to like function as a human. And then we'd pick the kids up at like 5:30 and they'd be hangry and I'd have to feed them. And then we had like an hour together and I put them to bed. And I'm telling myself, this is normal, right? Like, because the story is, oh, you have littles. So therefore, everything should feel so hard and so terrible. And that's okay. And then I realized, and only because I had this collision of things happening, all of that, which I don't know if I would have stepped out of it if I hadn't lost my mom at the same time. And it was like, nope. This is not how I want to do my life. This is not the kind of mom I want to be. This is not the kind of family experience that we set out to create when we chose to have children. And so I need to look at something else. And so that's when I took some time to grieve and just think about my next step and left my job. And then I started my own business because I wanted to build it on the foundation of being in charge of how I spent my time, of what my days look like, of how, that I would be done working by like 2:30 in the afternoon. Now when my kids are older and they come home from school and I'm done. And then I'm mom Sherpa to all the hockey practices and the gymnastics practice and everything else that's happening, right? Because that's what's important. But it takes a constant effort of reminding myself sometimes that this is value, right? It is valuable for me to have this flexibility that I no longer pay for childcare because I set up a business in this way. And even when my business isn't making enough or as much as I want it to, or any of the things like the goals that I set there aren't happening, I remember the reason why I'm doing this and really try and ground back into that as that marker of success.
Yes, that is so good. And I think you touched on a really good point there was we get to define what normal is. Like I think that alone for so many people who just accept the definition they're given, right? You accept, all right, it's just going to be chaos. You'll just have to suffer through it for the next 10 years and then you'll get to enjoy life. Like a newsflash, there's going to be some other chaos in 10 years that you're going to have to suffer through until you die. Okay. But when you decide to make your normal your own definition where you're like, hey, my normal, I get to be done by 3:00 where I get to hang out with my kids. I get to go to hockey practice. I get to do these things because I get to define this. So I love that you said that. I just want to honor you for living that out because we need more people to show people an example of what's possible. Like this shouldn't be that abnormal for you to be able to design your life around the things that you want to do every freaking day.
Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, because for sure I get annoyed driving to the rec center 4 times a week. I'm like, really? Is this my life? Then I'm like, wait a minute. This is exactly what I want. And the bigger picture, like, right? Zoom out, look at that bigger picture and know that it's those car rides to the hockey rink where my kids tell me about their day and like share something with me that's really important. And even just having this conversation with you is such a good reminder and reflection on this because we can get lost in the big goals of the numbers of clients and the, wanting to get on podcasts and whatever else it is that we like are trying to achieve in our business. And it's so great that we have that. And I think it's important still to be ambitious. And like I was telling you before we got started recording, there's this balance that we're constantly trying to strike between being ambitious and being present and happy with what we have now. And it's a very challenging thing to live both of those things at the same time. but that's always what I'm working on.
I agree too, because I think for a lot of people, especially the entrepreneurs, they kind of have that all in mentality where you want to just be all in on a thing. So either you're going to be all in on work and your family life just disappears, or you go the opposite route and you go all in on your family life and then your business falls apart. So like to be able to find that harmony where you can be in both spots and be all in the same time is nirvana, but it is achievable, right? Do you think that there is a way for people to like be in the best of both worlds?
Yeah, and I think it's different for everyone, right? Like it's so important to recognize that the definition of success is very subjective. And it is about whatever it means to you. And you just have to ground back into that regularly because it's so easy to get caught up in other people's definitions of success and other people's demonstrations of success, especially when we're on social media and we're just seeing constantly like my 6-figure month, week, day, whatever. That's the next thing that's showing up there. And you're just constantly comparing yourself to this highlight reel of other people in the world. And it's really challenging because we can get pulled into that so much. And, you know, just to kind of tie this back a little bit into like what I actually do in my business, I work with entrepreneurs. And the reason I choose to work with entrepreneurs is because I want more people to be able to build lives that they're happy with, that bring them joy, because I think that is what's going to, you know, lift the overall frequency of the world. Like that's my bigger picture mission. And one of the things that I focus on is visibility without relying on social media. And I think that's because there's so much toxicity happening in some of those platforms that we're just doing so much damage to ourselves, you know, from a mental health perspective, that it's really killing our confidence, which is hurting our sales, which is making us feel like we suck as business owners and we're going in this big downward spiral, which again is like, come back to why are you doing this? Who is it for? What are you trying to create? And how do we feel like that we're contributing to that regardless of the clients, the revenue, etc.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. So I'm genuinely curious, like for someone who is looking to gain visibility outside of social or outside of, you know, the online space, like I think a lot of us have been told, again, the normal is, hey, just go post more on social media or go run an ad campaign when you have to basically just be this dancing pony in front of everyone else, right? And put yourself out there, run this social media highlight reel of a fake life where you're standing in front of a house saying, hey, I'm so happy, this is my life. So for you, like what is the better route that you recommend someone take where they're not subjecting themselves to that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't believe in cookie cutter strategies. So there's no one size fits all when it comes to visibility. And in over 15 years, I've worked with Fortune 500 companies and nonprofits and small businesses across dozens of industries and never written the same plan twice. And that's because you are different business. You have different goals. Your audience is different. Your message will be different. And also your strengths and the ways that you are going to do really well when it comes to visibility are going to differ amongst businesses. So I think it's really important to know that you need a customized plan, first of all, and then it's a matter of figuring out what are some of those core pieces that work for you. And it's an ongoing experiment, a scientific experiment of doing things like, just for example, podcasting, speaking on stages, going to networking events, creating collaboration opportunities, whether that be email list based ones or digital things, or actually like referral partnerships, right? There's so much I think that we overlook, that we think there's all these fancy digital things and we should be able to create automations and sell in our sleep and do all of this stuff. And that does work to a certain degree and for some people, and it also doesn't for some people or at certain parts of your business, right?
Yeah, I think there's two really good important points that you brought. So the most recent one there, the automation part, I think a lot of people try to jump forward to that step where they're trying to automate their business starting from square one. Like for me, anytime I've ever seen success in automation, it's come from, hey, you built this process manually for 15 years. Now you figure out a way to automate some of that to gain some time back. But you're not starting from, hey, here's a brand new idea. Let me automate it to go print money. right? It's, hey, here's the thing that like I've already established through a lot of hard work, trial and error. Let's speed it up a little bit, not just, hey, let's start a brand new business tomorrow where I can stay on with my PJs and it's just going to print money.
Yeah, I do think it's more of on the scaling end of things than on the like launching side. So it depends on where you're at in your business for sure.
Yes. And there's so many people who are out there trying to sell a course that says, hey, do you want to escape your 9 to 5? Buy my course and I'll teach you how to just make money instantly from your pajamas. But like those people are falling into that trap. And I think to go back to the earlier point where there is no cookie cutter plan, I agree 100%, because so many people are trying to just copy what someone else is doing and then getting pissed off when it doesn't work. Like, hey, I did this exact thing. I bought the course, followed it step by step, it didn't work. Or I followed exactly what this other person did, and it didn't work for me. I'm just the worst, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm hearing this so much lately. Like we're in this like era of like everybody who's been burned by some kind of a digital course, digital product, even like high level coaching or mastermind experience. And don't get me wrong, like I admire and I fully believe that when somebody does something and it works for them, why wouldn't they want to share that and try and help other people to follow that methodology? And in some cases, it does work to a certain degree. But I've always been a brand strategist, like at the core of what I do. And nobody knows what that means, which is why I call myself a visibility coach now. But ultimately, what it means is that your uniqueness is what you need to understand in order to sell yourself. Like what makes you different from the other people who do what you do? What makes your product different? What makes your offer different? How do you show up like and infuse your personality into what you do? Because bottom line is people buy from people, right? There needs to be trust there. There needs to be that knowing, like we need to get out in front of people, build those relationships. And however long those take, they're taking a lot longer these days to build in the online space. Like I just signed a new client this morning. We met over a year ago in person, which usually helps a lot fast track things. I was offering a workshop and she came to it. And she's since then been listening to my podcast, subscribed to my emails, done some of my like free things, and like finally come full circle. So like it takes a while because people are hesitant a little bit, skeptical, also just cautious with our money. And I get that. That makes sense. But the overall, I think the buyer's journey is just taking longer. So as service providers and business owners, we also need to recognize that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's a big tactical advantage for someone who doesn't try and fast track that journey by automating everything and taking the personality out of it, but by leaning into their authentic self, their uniqueness, their own identity, and injecting that in. And yes, it might take a little bit longer, but I think the results of that are so much better.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm almost like we're in this like throwback to the personalized sales process where you actually have a sales call and talk to people instead of like sending them to a page and hoping that they're going to drop, $1,000 on your course, which I mean, it happens. It still does happen, but not enough, not enough to create a sustainable revenue sometimes.
I agree. So talking about like brand, which I love the word brand because I feel like branding is such an important part of a lot of things. But for a person to really figure out their brand, correct me if I'm off base in this, but I think they really need to understand who they are in their like most authentic form in their own identity, right? Where they strip away whatever the world has told them that they are, but they figure out like 100% for themselves, hey, this is who I am. I have all the self-confidence in the world. I have no image to maintain because I am who I am. Right? Would you kind of agree that's like a core part of success there?
Yes, which is why everyone is scared to do that work. It's so beautiful when we can come to that conclusion and you can find yourself in a place that you just feel truly aligned and truly authentic and truly like free to show up as who you are. And it does, like, I realized as I was, bumping around in my first couple of years of business, trying to figure out like how do I engage with business owners and brand strategy. And I realized when I start talking to them, I'm like, who are you? And they're like, what? Like, we're having that conversation, and like this is getting deep. Like, we're pulling back all of the layers to really uncover what makes you shine and to help you see that. And there's a lot of stuff to filter through, right? From your beliefs that you've built up over your whole life, the environment that you're in, all of that. And I'm not a psychologist, but I just understand like how to help people see what makes them unique as a business owner, and then also to hook into that, like we were talking about at the beginning, the why behind it, because you need that internal motivation to keep yourself going through the challenges that you face as a business owner when you try a new offer and it doesn't work, or you thought you signed a client and then they decided not to ever respond to your invoice, like all of those things that happen, and we have to help ourselves through that.
I agree. And I think when you are really clear on your why for, why you're doing the business, I think it helps your customers associate better too, because they resonate with your why. Like, I think the more clear you are, the easier it is for them to convert because they get it too.
Yeah, and more, depending on like what kind of business you have, but people really are working harder at knowing who they're supporting. Like, we're clicking through those ads on Instagram and seeing like, this is a like, sweatshop in China selling me this product, and I don't want that. I want to support somebody like locally, like artisans at the markets. Like, we're doing a lot more local shopping, just universally, I think. So the same goes for even with service providers, right? Like, I want to really feel like I know somebody before I invest in working with them. And I want that to be a two-way street where people really know who I am and know, have a good connection with me. And it's not just about like the results that I'm promising that they're going to get and that they have an expectation, because that just doesn't lead to a good working relationship either.
Yes. Yeah, it's a mess, honestly. So for someone who's like just starting out on that journey, where do they typically start? Like, what is your starting point for someone who's trying to figure out who they even are?
I mean, there lots of pieces to that. I think that it's a bit challenging to do that work alone, to be honest, because sometimes you just need a little bit of reflection back to you. This is something that I support people with. So like, you just need to be able to have a conversation and have it kind of pulled out of you, like have the right questions asked, uncover your why. One of the exercises that I use, which comes from like Tony Robbins, is called 7 Levels Deep. And you literally just ask yourself, why do I want to be successful? And you have an automatic first answer to that, right? And then you ask yourself why, and you fill in the blank with the answer to your first question. And you keep doing that 7 times. You can probably get to 4 before you go, whew, this is getting tough. Or then you start to have those breakthroughs and you start to see like what's really behind everything. I was at a conference one time, and this is just another kind of like question to ask yourself. It was a little breakout session that we were doing, and the prompt was, if you really knew me, you would know that blank. And like, if you're in a space where you've been kind of like in a self-reflection mode, like you're immersed in like an in-person experience or something like that, or you giving yourself some journaling time or whatever, you might be surprised with the answer. I was certainly surprised with the answer I got when I said that, because it was make the world a happier place. And then I started to see the connections between like what I was doing in my business and why I was doing it, right? Like, let me help entrepreneurs make the thing they're really passionate about successful so that they can like create this beautiful life with their families. And now I have a podcast where I talk to guests all about that. And it's all about, building the life around your business. Building your business around your life for that exact same reason, so that you can pour more joy into your day.
Yeah. Do you think it's fair to say that people who've done that work, who've done the work on themselves first, tend to have more successful businesses?
That's really interesting. I think I just like personally prefer to work with people who are more into some level of personal development and have a little more self-awareness, because and they tend to also be people who are passion-based, heart-centered entrepreneurs rather than like I'll just call it like it is, money chasing entrepreneurs, right? Like people who are like, oh, I see this opportunity to make money. I'm going to make as much money as I can, and then I'm going to sell it and I'm going to move on. I'm here for the people who are like, I just really want to spend all my day crafting artisan chocolates, or like helping people with organize their digital files, or taking photographs, or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think for me, it's, I believe that better people build better businesses. So when I say that, I mean people who are the best versions of themselves. They've stripped away all the things that the world has told them are normal forever, and they understand who they are authentically. They're able to better operate because they can be more authentic. They can care about their customer more. They can put a little bit more love and personality into the things that they do without trying to put on this mask to just do a thing to make money for it. But like, you can tell the difference in a business that's actually genuinely trying to serve their customers compared to somebody who's trying to sell them something.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why brand is the foundation of your business. Your own brand awareness and the strength of your brand comes from that authenticity and the consistency as well, in terms of how you show up, how you interact with your customers, the way that you choose to sell, like the mechanisms, the whole experience from A to B, like you never knew who I was, to we start working together. Everything that happens in that sphere is part of your brand experience. And strong brands win, right? Like that, we know that universally is true. We know some big brands like Disney and Starbucks and things like that, where we see them on a regular basis and we understand what we're going to get, and it's exactly what we're looking for when we go to either of those places.
Yeah. And I think people miss the concept that holds true for yourself. Like I guess it's easy to gloss over who you are in your own brand, because a lot of people tend to put on a different mask for different social situations or different people, different relationships. And it's kind of hard for them to figure out, like, hey, if I go to McDonald's in New York or California, I'm going to get the same experience, right? But if I show up differently in a friend that I have in New York or a friend I have in California, if I show up as a different version of myself, my brand is non-existent. I don't know who I am.
Yeah. And so we talk a lot about values when it comes to brand development, for sure. And a lot of the times people will ask me, well, are my business values different than my personal values? Right. And I think there's a lot of overlap here. And it's a matter of just identifying what you think those are and the ways that they apply in your business. Right. So one of my core values in my business is collaboration. And that extends so much beyond my business. But the way that it shows up in my business is that I love to work collaboratively with my clients. Like, I used to work in a PR firm where I felt like I was supposed to be a magician and go behind the scenes and like write a press release and a big strategy and do all this stuff without ever talking to the client, and then just like bring it back to them and be like, ta-da. No, that was one, super stressful. And two, it often ended up being like, well, that's not exactly what I wanted, because 25 other things happened in the time that we didn't talk to each other. And so now I'm really a big fan of like, let's do this together and actually like brainstorm. Like, you're not bringing anything to the table here. You know everything. It's my job to extract it from you, translate it back to you, and give it to you in a way that feels really good and that you are confident in moving forward with. So the collaboration process is part of how I operate, and it is a core value for me and for my business.
Yeah, it's such a good one. Sorry, I lost my voice for a second there. But I believe strongly that I think collaboration, like especially when you're not looking for the credit, but you're looking to just bring about the best result and just give, right? Because it's selfless service. I think that's one of the best ways to serve people, is just to show up and help them be the best version of themselves.
Yeah. And I mean, like it's why I do things like podcasting or affiliate partnerships where I like to share other people's stuff. I'm thinking of hosting an event, which feels really crazy because that seems like a lot of work, but I also think it would be really awesome because I love going to events. Like I was just in Dallas a couple of weeks ago. I met like basically 40 new friends who will all be some kind of business collaboration partner over the next few months, which is incredible.
Well, I'll definitely co-sign the idea. You should do it. So stamp that idea in stone. You should
Keep
definitely
putting it
do it.
out there and then eventually it happens, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I believe there's a tremendous amount of power, and I think a lot of those events, it's not even just the things you learn, but it's the relationships and the people you meet, right, to go alongside each other. I was actually on an event last week, and really the content was great, like the learning of, hey, here's a presentation, let's learn some stuff, awesome. But coming alongside people and the energy that you get from being next to people who are on the same mission is hard to match, right? And I think that right along with collaboration is being alongside other people who are on that same mission and journey is such like a life hack, if you will, for just trying to level up.
Oh my gosh, 100%. And that's why, I mean, I think I've almost always in my entire business been in some kind of group program, because I know as a person, I just need that feedback. I need the community around me and you need to find it, right? Like I am currently in my basement in a place called Cochrane, Alberta. You probably don't even know where that is. And if I don't leave, like here I am by myself, if I don't reach out even digitally to people, or if I don't physically go to events, like you can just get stuck in your basement feeling very alone because you literally are. So you have to make some effort to build those relationships and to foster those relationships. And like you said, from a very giving place of like, how can I help you? I think that's why one of the main reasons that I started a podcast is because I wanted to have an easy offer for people. Like I would love to showcase you on my platform because I have a platform, right? And that makes it a really easy like connection versus can I be on your podcast?
Yeah, I think that's an awesome point too. Like it makes me think about how much easier it is to show up at an event like that and say, hey, how can I help you? Or to ask someone else what's going on in their life and take a genuine interest. Because like so much of those events, all of the people, the majority of the people are feeling the same level of nervousness where they have a thing that they have that they need. They're afraid to ask because they're all sitting in that same boat. When someone shows up and is like, hey, I'm taking a genuine interest in you. How can I, tell me about your life? How can I help support you? You start to like really break open those relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then lean into that too, right? If someone asks you that, actually accept the help because a lot of the time we have our own barriers up. We're like, oh, well, they must want this, or they're going to try and sell me their program or something. Just like try and shake that all off.
Yeah. Accepting help is such a challenge for people. It's a struggle I had for a long time because you feel some level of guilt, or you feel like then you need to repay them, or what if they don't do it as good as you can do it? That's a real struggle, right? Because, especially I think
I've been in business for 7 years now, so I should be able to do all of these things. I know all of this. And so why isn't it working? And this little loop that's playing in your head, which you don't even realize is just constantly going, that needs to be shut down.
Yeah, I think there's so much power in those relationships, especially when you can ask other people for help and have faith and allow them to actually show up and serve. So good. A couple other questions I wanted to ask you before we kind of wrap up here. You talked a bit about success before. I'd love to ask you, what is your actual definition of success in your life?
Yeah, I actually wrote in a co-authored book a whole chapter on this, and it was basically called Success Isn't Six Figures. And one of the main statements that I always say for me is success is walking my kids to school every day. It's truly about the freedom of schedule, not feeling like I'm ever having to be at a certain place on somebody else's timeline. That is causing any kind of resentment, right? It's about reducing the resentment in life, like that I'm doing most everything that I can as much as possible within my own choice, which is an amazing place to be able to operate from. And I recognize that is truly a blessed place to be.
Yeah, that is amazing. And I feel like that's the spot that a lot of people struggle with getting to, right? Because like we said before, they're stuck in the normal of what they think is normal, right? Operating that 9 to 5 where they're just a victim to everyone else's decisions instead of, taking control and being able to have the freedom to be where they want, when they want, doing what they want.
Yeah, and that's because we also tie that to financial freedom, right? And like the reality is you have to pay for your life, and that has to come from somewhere. And so, whether you have a good partner who has a good job, or you can get a loan to start a business, or something that gives you a little bit of breathing room, because it's not just an automatic, well, I have a business now, and so I create my own schedule, and now I don't start work till 10 and I only work till 2, and that's all great, but like also, are you making money? Right? Or where's that coming from so that you don't feel like a pressure point around that?
Yeah, I want to add another layer to that. There's a conversation I had with someone else recently about when you are truly operating as your authentic self and you get to that spot, that nirvana. If you can align yourself with a career, a job, whatever it is that you truly enjoy, it really removes the barrier because now you actually want to be there doing that because it actually fulfills a part of you because it's not just a job. It's something that actually brings you joy. So you are able to kind of rig the game in your favor by doing something that brings you joy. Like, it's not like you have to have one or the other. You can do both.
Yeah. And that also creates some challenges sometimes because we can wrap our identities into the success of our business, right? We can feel like what we have to show at the end of the month is a direct reflection on our own personal value. And I want to have that conversation again. I've had that conversation with multiple people on my podcast too. So definitely you can go check some episodes of that out because I've struggled with that in various ebbs and flows in my business as well. And so there's a fine line around all of this, right? Like, I think that the key message is we're not saying it isn't hard. We're saying that it's worth it.
Yes, 100%. Because it does suck. Like, there's a lot of parts of this that do suck. But honestly, the alternative, like just pretending it doesn't exist and just living a quote unquote normal life, sucks way worse. So it's just getting started.
You choose your hard, right? Like getting up every day at before 5 a.m. so I get myself ready and get 2 kids out of bed and take them to day home in pajamas and driving in the dark and falling asleep in the minivan in the passenger seat was hard. Leaving my job was hard, and starting a business was hard. So either way.
No, I love that. And it's such encouragement for someone who's sitting there kind of struggling with that. Like, this current thing sucks, but I'm afraid of the next step because it's going to be hard. So like, you being an example of what's possible when you go through that, and especially being someone who's out creating the content and telling the story and going alongside people to help them actually work through that, is so incredibly important because people need that. They need an example of what's possible, and they need people alongside of them to help them get through it. Because like, it does suck, but it's so worth it when you go through it because the other side of it is freedom. It's when you get to live true success. I love that. Great answer. Thank you for that one. My next question would be, if you had one bit of advice to give someone to give them a practical, tactical tip to help them kind of just have a happier, more joyful, more successful day today, what would that bit of advice be?
Yeah, I mean, I think based on this conversation, it's if you're ever feeling out of alignment, and you know what that is for you, right? Like where it feels like you're beating your head against a wall or just nothing's working or everything's frustrating or whatever's going on, then try and reconnect to your why, the bigger vision around why you're doing what you're doing, and to give yourself that motivation back, to build that momentum. So knowing your why is something, it's an exercise that I do for myself, probably annually, sometimes more, depending on the amount of pivots that I needed to do this year in my business, right? Like we need to reconnect with that so that we can have that central grounded place to move forward and make future decisions from, rather than from a place of like scatteredness and frustration and desperation and scarcity and all the negative things that come in.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great answer. Well, you're 2 for 2. That, not that I doubted you, but I appreciate that. So my last question is a bit of a curveball. What is your favorite type of cake?
My favorite type of cake? Ooh, I love, what kind of cake do I love? I like apple pie, but only my Nana's apple pie.
Okay, well, that is a good thing you mentioned that, because the reason why I usually ask this question, not just because it's called Not Have Cakes, but I always find that like there's some level of core memory or association to this, and I just love digging into that a little bit, because I find there's always these little moments where like, well, let me ask you this: what is it about your Nana's apple pie that like you love and brings back that feeling?
Yeah, she is a fantastic cook and she makes homemade apple pie, homemade pastry, and I've eaten it at every family dinner for my entire life. And she made it for my birthday for me this year, which was just a couple weeks ago. She's like going to be 89 and she's still making apple pie. It's amazing. Um, one year, my husband tried to buy an apple pie for my birthday, and oh, did that not go over? I was like, how dare you buy me an apple pie? So he tells me that I don't like apple pie. So that was the importance of clarifying. It had to be Nana's apple pie.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I think it goes to, that same common theme. Like there's so many little things that just being present for, right? Being able to have that experience. Like now apple pie is a core memory for you, and it's a thing that you love because she was able to be there and make that for you and provide, not being so busy doing other stuff, but take the time to actually make that with love, right? And the difference between your Nana's apple pie and the store-bought apple pie is what? Like it's apples. The ingredients are pretty much the same, right? Like the love and the care that came from her baking that thing authentically because she knew who it was going to. And man, that's a beautiful way to kind of tie this all together. I love that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for creating this space to have these conversations. I so love that you're out here doing this work and sharing this with people and like really supporting everyone on their journey. And I'm really glad to be part of it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It means a lot. And likewise, the work that you do to show up for people and help them just live their best life is admirable. So honor to you as well. Where can people support you?
Yeah. So if you love podcasts, please come over and listen to Entrepreneur School. And you can find me online as well at ksco.ca, and you'll find all my social media and everything that we're up to over on the website.
I love that. All right. We'll be sure to do that. This has been amazing. I got a lot out of it. I just want to thank you again. It has been a true pleasure. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim.